So, actually, there was another reason I deleted the original video as well, and it was because the scope of the project got out of hand when I got to the ZX games. You see, I was doing a deep dive on them as well, and I didn't remember everything from the story at the time, so I had to replay the games, and that did not play out as intended, so yeah. Anyway, let's get started. To start, I guess I should talk about my history with Mega Man ZX. It is a sequel to my history with Mega Man Zero. Because I'd been so thoroughly disappointed by the Zero games, I went into ZX with no expectations whatsoever. And in retrospect, this was probably my mistake. See, going in with no expectations basically meant that I was expecting ZX to be a complete nothing burger. I could not have been more wrong. From the intro, I immediately fell in love with ZX, and that feeling only got stronger as I went along. To say that I was absolutely blown away by the intro stage would have been an understatement. It was completely different from Zero, and, well, I'm just going to come out and say it. ZX is everything Zero isn't. It picked up on all of the problems I had with the Zero games and basically fixed them. The tone is completely different. The setting is more vibrant. The characters aren't actually left in the dust. And it's a really nice feeling. The story is cohesive and comprehensible without relying on outside material. And the music! Oh, the music! When I actually played the game, some of that joy was tempered because they do have a few problems with the gameplay. I will admit that. With that being said, I think the difficulty was a huge step up from the Zero games in the sense that it was more fair difficulty as opposed to screen crunch and nonsense. Like, the factory mission in Zero One and how everyone hates it? ZX doesn't really have anything like that. Oh, yeah, I'd like to mention I didn't actually play the games at first. I watched playthroughs of them on YouTube. This was the case with the X and Zero games as well, but I did eventually play them. And I definitely enjoyed them a lot more playing them than watching them. But with ZX, it was actually kind of the other way around, believe it or not. With that being said, I do absolutely love playing ZX still, as you can see by the gameplay footage I took for this video. Yeah, I'm still playing on casual scenario mode with save assist enabled. That won't change for a while yet. I do have normal mode files in both ZX and ZX Advent, but I haven't made a whole lot of progress in them. So, anyway, a step by step breakdown of the good and the bad in ZX. And since I started with the bad in the Zero video, I may as well start with it here too. First off, the common complaint you hear from everyone who has played Mega Man ZX, the map. It is absolutely terrible. I will not justify it in any way. It is annoying to get around. You have to figure out how to get to each location, and the trans servers don't help, especially the red ones. Also, the biometal forms can be a little bit difficult to handle, and I really don't like that they take Model X from you after you get Model ZX, unless you've beaten the game with both characters. Actually, I didn't have to deal with that because I'm playing on casual scenario mode and you only have to beat the game once for that in the Legacy Collection, but the fact that they take Model X from you is still pretty awful. Also, the level system is very annoying. The game makes you not hit the boss weak points in order to make sure your biometals are not damaged, and I think that's a terrible system. And I'm really glad they removed it in ZX Advent so you can actually hit the boss weak points now. ZX Advent compensated by making sure that not every boss had a weak point, which I also think is stupid, but it's better than getting penalized for hitting the weak point. Also, there were some points where I felt the difficulty was a little too high, such as the final boss kind of throws you off with the first form being really easy, and then the second form is complete garbage. It's just annoying, you know? And then there were a few times where I felt it was too easy, like the second Model L pseudoroid that you can defeat just by shooting up, and you get a level 4 victory for doing that too. That was kind of stupid, especially since it's surrounded by pseudoroids that are much more difficult to defeat. The Model F pseudoroids are inexcusable. They are very difficult to level 4, and I had to reset several times every time I tried to. So, yeah, the difficulty is a little bit weird in some parts, but it didn't take away from my enjoyment of the game overall, except in the normal mode file where I actually had to pay attention to boss weak points because repairing the biometals costs a ton of E crystals. Also, this isn't really a problem in the first ZX since all of the biometal forms have their regular uses. But in ZX Advent, a lot of the A-trans forms, especially the pseudoroids, are only situationally useful, and they're often one-time gimmicks that you can't do anything with. For example, Chronoforce is very useful for his time bomb ability, but aside from that, there is basically no reason to ever use him. Also, most of the other forms are pretty much made obsolete when you get Model ZX and ZX Advent, because it just does better than all of them. I mean, you can justify using Aeolus and Queen Bee and Voltron for flying, but that's about it. And there is actually one major story complaint I have, and that is specifically Ael's story in the first ZX. I felt like the way she bonded with Prairie compared to Vent was very strange, and I dunno, I just didn't like the way they handled her compared to Vent. With that being said, I do like all of the other protagonists, and I don't hate Ale, I just think that they should have done something different with her. It was a case of wasted character syndrome, which Inti Creates seems to be especially fond of, if the Zero series is any indicator, and also some of the other characters in the ZX games. The villains are comparatively lacking. Prometheus and Pandora are very cool, I love them, but they're pretty much the only villains that are actually interesting. The Mega Men in ZX Advent were kind of wasted, and the less said about Serpent and Albert, the better. Of course, part of this is probably because we never got ZX3, but it is what it is. I think that covers all of my major problems with the ZX games, so now we're on to the good things. Fair warning, I get very enthusiastic about these games. The scenery is gorgeous. In the Zero games, I didn't really notice the backgrounds as often as I should have because they were trying to lean into that gritty post apocalyptic aesthetic and everything just kind of blurred together. ZX doesn't have that problem. Everything is colorful, vibrant, beautiful, and I can get lost in the stages. Sometimes, literally, the scrapyard in ZX Advent is a complete maze, and I still kind of have a love hate relationship with that stage. I mentioned the music before, but Mega Man ZX legitimately has one of my favorite video game soundtracks of all time. Like, I can't even properly describe how much I love this soundtrack. It's just About as close to perfect as you can possibly get. ZX Advent is slightly worse in that it actually has a very small handful of tracks I don't like, but it is still really high up there. Determined Eyes alone blows the entirety of the Zero series soundtrack out of the water cleanly. And I never really understood why people liked Cannonball so much until I heard Hard Revenge. Whew! So, yeah, I think I should stop talking about the music now because if I don't, I'll never shut up. I love the cast in these games. I already mentioned my issues with the villains and Ale, but everyone else is great. While I am a little bit upset that Girouette died as early as he did, at least we got an idea of what he was like, and we definitely saw his impact on the other characters in the long term. And Prairie is Alouette. She's all grown up now, and I'm proud of her, and I love her. Vent is your typical anime protagonist. A lot of people take issue with that, but I don't. I think he's a really good character. He develops well, he has a good relationship with Prairie, and he's just really adorable. I kind of have a thing for the stupid idiot protagonist who rushes into things without thinking, so my bias does play a part in this, but yeah. And I probably shouldn't talk about Vent and ZX Advent too much because, he is exactly my type. I'll leave it at that. Ash is best girl. I love that her intro stage basically tells you everything you need to know about her, and then later on it's revealed that she has some surprisingly deep hidden depths. She has a great design, a great personality. I just really love her. Also, I absolutely adore Ash's interactions with Vent. They play off of each other so perfectly. It took me a little while to warm up to Gray, but he is adorable. I think he needs a big hug, and he deserves better. I already said my piece about Ale earlier. I don't think she's that much better in ZX Advent, but she's alright, and I do like her dynamic with Gray. To elaborate further on the antagonist Mega Men, I like them conceptually, but they are definitely very incomplete. If I had to pick a favorite among them, it'd definitely be Sharnak. And yes, I know he has the least personality out of them, but his backstory makes him a really fascinating character, and I wish we got to see more of him. The Sage Trinity, they're there. I like Mikhail, he's fun. Thomas is not really much of anything, and Albert is a villain. He sure is a villain. Whoops, looks like I found something to complain about in the character section. Sorry. One issue I did have with the first ZX was that the biometals didn't really get very many opportunities to show their personality. They fixed that in ZX Advent with Model A. He never shuts up, and I kind of love it. The character dynamics are just on another level. I already mentioned my favorites, but just everything about them is fantastic. The secret ending exists. I don't really pay much attention to it because it's a sequel hook to a sequel that we never got. So, yeah, I'm aware of its existence and that's about it. Honestly, I think that aside from the antagonist Mega Men, ZX Advent wrapped everything up very nicely without the secret ending. I guess the four guardians are forever destined to be incomplete no matter what form they're in. Another thing I really liked about the ZX games is I kind of mentioned it offhand in the Zero video, but I had a really hard time making a proper connection between the X and Zero series. just felt like they didn't do enough to show that Zero was a sequel to X. Maybe it's just me, though. But the ZX games definitely do not have that problem. They connect very solidly back to the Zero series. You have the background stuff with CL. There's a lot of shared scenery between the games, except the ZX versions are updated, of course. And the plot just continues cleanly off of the Zero plot. When you go into Area M, it feels like Ragnarok is trying to come back to life. It's just such a beautiful and terrifying background. And there are also a lot of little Easter eggs peppered throughout the games. All of these callbacks to the previous series. Like in the Tower of Verdure and ZX Advent, you can see wire sponge embedded in the tree at the bottom. It really makes you wonder what Reploids were made of back then if that body didn't decay for all of that time. And of course, how can I talk about ZX callbacks to Zero without mentioning the Omega fight? It is a huge upgrade to the fight with Omega in Zero 3. Feels like how it actually should be in terms of difficulty. I unironically like Omega more in ZX than I did in Zero. Him as a cameo bonus boss is so much better than him as a plot point. And then after you beat him, you get to play as him with Model O? Well, you do. I don't, because that's not a thing in casual scenario mode. Whoops. You can still fight Omega in casual scenario mode, and he is still a pretty good challenge. Actually, I think that's one more thing I need to talk about, the difficulty settings. When I very first tried the game out, I actually started on normal mode. I didn't get very far in it, but I started on normal mode. And even back then, I liked the difficulty. But also, casual scenario mode or easy mode on the actual game cartridges is probably the best form of an easy mode that I've experienced in all of the Mega Man games that I've played. It actually still poses a reasonable challenge without being too difficult, and it has a lot of quality of life things like being able to save yourself after you fall into a bottomless pit. It really feels like the game was properly designed around having an easy and normal mode. I've not played hard mode myself, but I also haven't heard very good things about it, so I will leave it out of this video. I think if I keep going too much longer, I'll start to ramble about irrelevant things, so it's probably a good time to wrap things up here. In short, I really love the ZX games. They're some of my favorite Mega Man games, and they've fixed a lot of the problems that I had with the Zero games. But they do have some problems with them, as all things are flawed. But that's okay, I love them despite those issues. I don't have any grand fanfic tale to tell this time, so signing off now. Goodbye.